to begin?
Thank you very much. I think I just let you take over and give us the information that we're looking for. Thanks.
Absolutely. And we also have Sally Kadala from Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. Sally, would you like to say something?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to share with you Supervisor Walkinshaw was planning to be here tonight and was unable to last minute. As you may have heard, there was a pedestrian fatality yesterday in the Braddock district, and he's gone to join that community in a meeting tonight. So I know he's disappointed to not be here and anxious to learn what VDOT and FCDOT have to share. And with that, we can get into it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm joined today by Huda Ali of the Virginia Department of Transportation. And we're going to go ahead and go over the 2022 paving plan. Huda's going to take over, and then I'll describe the proposed striping modifications that we have in the Braddock and Mason districts this year. And so I'm going to turn it over to Huda to get us started.
Thank you, Lauren. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Supervisor Gross and Sally. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Do you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Huda Ali. I'm the Assistant Director for Transportation and Land Use for Arlington and Fairfax County. I will be presenting the VDOT annual paving program tonight. Just to give a quick overview of what we're going to cover tonight, the lane mile inventory for the state and for our district, the budget, the planning and construction. We'll also cover the process for how roads get selected for paving and how the pavement condition is determined using the CCI system, the type of treatments, information about our dashboard, and the different types of pavement marking and striping before we transition to the county presentation on the topic. As you can see here, Nova District has over 14,000 lane miles. To put in perspective, that is equivalent to going to the West Coast and back more than twice. The actual number might be higher, as this does not include ramp mileage and many of the recent added road. On this slide, you can see the breakdown of lane mileage maintained in our district. Over half of are in Fairfax County alone, and the other half is a split between Prince William and Loudoun County, with only 2% in Arlington County, where we only maintain interstate and primary roads. And Arlington County maintains their own subdivision and secondary roads. So each year, our district receives a set amount of budget for paving. As you can see from the bottom row, repaving primary and secondary roads is receiving a higher allocation this year compared to prior year, while the total budget is slightly lower than previous year. And in this year, we're not paving interstate roads because the contract was rejected because the bids were too high. As a result, the interstate budget was allocated to the other road types. Moving to planning and construction for paving. So the construction aspect of paving is a seasonal process during the warmer weather month of April, of spring to early fall. However, the planning process is a year-round process. It starts in the spring going into fall, into the summer, with the data collection for the next season. Over the summer into the fall, we start analyzing the data, determine how many roads needs to be paved compared to the available budget, prepare the schedules, and coordinate with central office. Later in winter, we close out previous contracts, put out new contracts for bid, and we award and execute new contract by February into March of the paving year. So how are roads selected for paving? This is a question we get quite often. The process is generally data-driven based on several factors. Pavement conditions based on current ratings, traffic volumes, avoid locations with upcoming VDOT and locality projects, avoid locations where underground utilities projects are planned, and group projects for economies of scale. And what that means is we consider entire neighborhoods when we pave a main street within that neighborhood to achieve efficiencies in contractor mobilization. We also receive feedback from our maintenance crews who are most familiar with the roads in their areas. Moving on to data collection. So how do we collect the data? We have contracts that drive roads with highly equipped vans, like the one you see in the picture, which can automatically analyze the detected pavement condition in terms of distress, texture, or roughness, and linked it with the location using GPS system. The van is also equipped with cameras, scanners to measure, for example, crack size and distance between cracks to determine the pavement condition. So how frequently do we collect data? It depends on the type of the road. Data is collected annually for interstate, primaries, and high volume secondaries with average annual daily traffic volume higher than 3,500 vehicles per day. For low volume secondaries, below 3,500 vehicles per day, and those are the ones with route numbers higher than 600 and makes the majority of the lane miles we maintain, and also includes subdivision streets and neighborhood roads. So for those, we do 20% every year with the goal to cover the lane mileage inventory every 5 years. This is a longer cycle, just mainly because of limited resources in terms of data collection and repaving. So moving on to the pavement readings. The pavement condition is then translated into a reading on a scale from 0 being worst to 100 being best, like in the case of a newly paved road. The reading we use is called CCI. It stands for Critical Condition Index. We focus on very poor road conditions and poor with sufficiency ratings below 60 CCI, the ones you see in red category on the screen. we do not pave roads with ratings higher than 60 CCI. So how do we determine the targets? Pavement condition targets are decided based on the type of roads. For interstate, high volume primaries and secondaries with more than 300 vehicles per day, our goal is to pave or to have 82% of the network at a 60 CCI rating or higher. For low volume primary and secondary roads, the ones you see in red, our target ratings are lower. This is mainly because these roads carry lower volume of traffic. Moving to the type of treatments. So we apply different type of treatments. For preventive maintenance, we try to extend the life of pavement by applying latex or slurry seal. We also do limited patching and crack seal. Candidate roads are typically not in poor condition. We also mill and overlay 2-inch, which is most common, and up to 4-inch, depending on the road condition. This treatment is applied to roads in poor condition. And the two treatments highlighted in gray are the most common. In very rare conditions, we may have to replace the full pavement and rebuild the road. These are typically very old roads that were built to a very old standard. So on this slide, we're going to mention a couple of resources available online where the public can access and learn about the pavement condition of the roads and whether it's on this year's schedule. So what you see on the slide is a snapshot of the current paving condition map for NOVA, color-coded based on condition, as explained on the legend to the right, with red being poor to blue as being excellent. The map captures road maintained by VDOT only and does not show roads within city and towns. On this slide, you see the 2022 paving plan. The plan is now available for public access. It shows the road planned for repaving in red. As the paving season progresses, you will start seeing the different colors appearing on the screen. This is an interactive map where you can enter your street name in the search function to find out if your street is being paved this year. If you click on the color line on the road, a box will pop up. And when you click the arrow, you can see the direct contact information for VDOT construction manager in charge of the project. You can see their name, email, and phone number listed. He can be contacted to get additional information. And I'll be showing or demonstrating how to do that search in a minute. So in our last slide of the information, pavement marking and striping. VDOT tried to take advantage of repaving to implement road striping in ways that will enhance safety and operation. Striping could range from replacing kind, as in put back what was existing before we mill and repave the road, we may occasionally restripe to improve traffic condition by extending a turn lane, for example. And lastly, as Lauren mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we take the repaving opportunity in collaboration and close coordination with the county to implement new marking patterns like road diet, which reduce the number of travel lanes to allow for enhanced on-road bike routes and pedestrian safety, which Lauren will be speaking about next in more details. On this last slide, some helpful information. In case you would like to report a road problem or maintenance request, you may call the 1-800 number for road, and or you can go to my VDOT to enter your request. There are also listed the links for the pavement condition map and for the 2022 paving map, which I would like to show it in a minute. Do you see that link? Or
No, we're only seeing, oh, no, we're just seeing you.
okay, let me see. How about now?
Yes, now we see the paving map.
Okay. So as we mentioned, it's an interactive map. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. For example, I'm gonna look up turn lane or place in Annandale. You type the road, you click enter. As you can see, it's now zoomed in into Fern Place, Annandale. The road is marked in red, so which means it's on the schedule. Now, if you click on the colored part of the road, a window will pop up and it will have the project manager name, phone numbers, email address, the contractor information. You could also see additional information about the street itself, the type of treatment, schedule, and more details. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Lauren. Thank you very much for your time and be safe.
Thank
Stop
you.
sharing now.
Perfect. All right, so as Huda indicated, we are really working on this in part. Let me make sure I don't drop you guys off my. We're working on this in partnership with VDOT, and so when they conduct this program, we started several years ago looking for opportunities to change the striping on the roads in order to improve the facilities for all users. Sometimes we look for bike lanes, we always look for bike lanes, we always look for crosswalks, and sometimes we even are just looking to add striping in order to have like a traffic calming effect on these roads. So it's really been a partnership between our two agencies, and so I'm going to go over the striping modifications, what we look for, what we're proposing in the Braddock and Mason districts this year. And then we'll have an opportunity for feedback from you all if there's anything that you think we've missed in looking at these locations. If you're familiar, if you've familiarized yourself with the map this year, or if you want to follow up, we'll have an opportunity for that in the coming weeks as well. So as I was just indicating, we are really collaborating on this effort, and this slide really outlines the shared responsibilities that we have for this program. So when VDOT releases their paving schedule or their draft paving schedule for the following year in the fall, we look for opportunities for improvements. They're releasing it just to us. It's not public at that time, but because it's just their final roads, as Huda mentioned, are determined based on the funding resulting from the snow removal and other things that happen in the winter. But we do look for new crosswalk markings, widening shoulders and medians, sometimes by shifting the lane markings, the need for bus stop relocations, and then also bike lanes and turn lane additions wherever we find that they might be suited. VDOT does develop the striping and signing plans with their consultants and then coordinates the implementation with their contractors. We lead the public engagement like tonight's meeting and coordination with the district supervisors. VDOT also identifies and reconstructs any substandard curb ramps or median roll-throughs to improve accessibility along the repaved roads. And then we install the signage that's associated with the bike lanes, any road diets, or any new crosswalks. But we're usually finishing that up the winter of the year after paving. So one of the main things that we look for is crosswalk improvements. We study places where we think that pedestrians may be crossing to determine if those locations meet VDOT warrants for marked crosswalks. And that means that we need to count at least 10 vulnerable, which means disabled or under age 15 or over age 60 pedestrians in an hour, or 20 pedestrians in an hour who don't meet the vulnerable notation by VDOT. And we also look for there to be adequate sight distance, and sometimes that includes restricting parking. VDOT will upgrade existing crosswalk striping from standard, the 2 parallel lines, to high visibility striping. So those are the bars that you see in this image on the right, near schools or transit stations, and also in urban centers. And then we at Fairfax County identify key crosswalks for future enhancements like pedestrian refuges, sometimes curb extensions, and we coordinate so that the striping can be in place so that in the future those changes can be added without having to modify the striping at the intersection if possible. We also look along the roadway linearly to repurpose underutilized road space. So many roads in Fairfax County were built wider than they were needed to be, with too many travel lanes or wider travel lanes than we consider standard today. And that can sometimes lead to speeding or inattentive driving. So when we repave the roads, we right size them to meet the needs of the users today and to narrow those lanes where appropriate to the standard today, which is 11 feet. And this really improves the safety for all road users, as I'll get into in a moment, at very low cost, because we're essentially putting back the same amount of striping in a slightly different location, sometimes a little bit of extra striping. And then the traffic capacity at signals is maintained, and legal on-street parking is typically maintained, except in cases that I'll discuss in a moment where we have some sight distance issues for crosswalks. And this helps us implement the planned bicycle network. And so on the next slide, I want to show you where we're addressing the speeding concerns. This is on Annandale Road in the Mason District. The before, you can see the travel lanes are quite wide. And so in the after, we're able to keep the parking that exists, and then we can add bike lanes and still achieve both of the travel lanes that are here, but they're much narrower. And when we've done this in the past, we've observed or counted the speed of the vehicles before and after. And though the median speed doesn't change significantly, it does reduce the top speeds. So we see the highest speeders are essentially eliminated, and we only see them dropping down to what was previously like the 85th percentile speed. So we have a variety of bicycle facilities in Fairfax County. This slide is showing the ones that we can implement through repaving. So I'm going to go over those and I'll describe some of the others that we can't. The first is a shared lane marking, or SHARO. That is a marking on the road that indicates where bicyclists should ride to be safest in the roadway. We're typically only using these where there's a gap in a bike lane. Sometimes that's at a signalized intersection where we needed to maintain the roadway capacity, so we couldn't continue the bike lane through the signalized intersection. And we will put a shared lane marking there. Sometimes that the roads weave in and out in width, and there's places where we cannot have a bike lane continuously, so there's a shared lane marking in the gap. And that's just placed sometimes in the middle of the roadway where it's most appropriate for a driver to fully pass the bicycle in the opposing lane, or on the closer to the curb where the lane is wider and the driver can pass staying partially in the lane. Then we have a standard bike lane. This is typically 4 feet wide when adjacent to a curb or the edge of the roadway in a section without curb and gutter, or up to 6 feet wide. And this is a dedicated space for bicyclists to use that's striped only on the roadway. And then we have a buffered bike lane, which includes a striped buffer. And that buffer is usually between the travel lanes and the bike lane. Occasionally that buffer will be between a parking lane and the bike lane, particularly in places where we might have high turnover of parked cars and a lot of doors opening and closing. That gives a place for the door to open where it's not striking a bicyclist in the bike lane. So as I mentioned, we have other facilities in Fairfax County. We are working to implement more protected bike lanes, and then we have a lot of trails in the county and sidewalks as well that are bikeable. But we are not implementing those through the paving program, through the restriping, because that requires more than just the striping and the signage that we do through this program. So I also want to go over the types of riders in Fairfax County. So this is a nationally recognized way of describing bicyclists. First I'll describe in red or pink is the not able or interested. These are people who cannot or will never bicycle. Then in blue, we have the interested but concerned. And typically these folks prefer trails or buffered or protected bike lanes. And then we have the enthusiastic and confident, who typically will use a standard bike lane, but they'll also ride on a trail or buffered or protected bike lane. And then the strong and fearless, who are pretty comfortable riding anywhere as long as there's pavement, or even sometimes not. So we are primarily meeting the needs of the strong and fearless and the enthusiastic and confident with this paving program. And we acknowledge that not all of the interested and concerned riders are going to be comfortable riding on bike lanes. In some roadways, they will be. And so on some roadways, we are able to meet the need of that group, but this is just the limitation of this program. And so I just want to acknowledge that there are many people who might be on the call tonight, or your friends and family who might not be comfortable riding on these lanes, all of them, but we're still meeting a portion of our riders, and we're still providing other benefits by adding bike lanes. So these are some of the other benefits of bicycle infrastructure. So the first is that bike lanes can increase the safety and comfort of people bicycling. So we just talked about that, particularly depending on the road. It could the confident cyclists and sometimes the interested but concerned cyclists if we have a low volume street and low speed street. Then we have bike lanes minimize pedestrians' exposure to traffic. So because the lanes that have traffic in them are narrower, the amount of time that a pedestrian is exposed to that traffic is reduced when they're crossing the street. They also can add a buffer between pedestrians and the moving vehicles on the road. So there's a distance where only bicyclists would be present immediately adjacent to a sidewalk, especially where there's no grass buffer that can be particularly more comfortable for pedestrians. Bike lanes also help reduce traffic and traffic noise. They can help, especially where we're reducing the number of lanes from people passing, which can typically causes higher noise levels. And then lastly, bike lanes improve visibility. So if you can see this driver pulling out of a driveway here, when the travel lane, when the through lane on the roadway is set further back from the curb, it helps both the driver in the road and the driver on the driveway or an adjacent street see each other more clearly because the line of sight is better at that angle. So now I'm going to go into the proposed facilities in these districts, and we're actually not proposing any bike lanes tonight in either of these districts, but we will discuss proposed shoulders and proposed crosswalks in Braddock and Mason districts. So the first is proposed shoulders in the Braddock district. Today, we're looking at Old Keene Mill Road between Rolling Road and Greely in the Braddock district. And this has two different sort of road configurations. The first is in both cases, it has 4 travel lanes with medians and turn lanes. But there's some sections where there's a very narrow shoulder that exists today and no curb and gutter. And then some sections where there is curb and gutter along with sidewalks, but there's no bicycle facilities. And so the proposal is, in anywhere where there is currently not curb and gutter, we would narrow all of the lanes to 11 feet and add any additional width, which is about 2 to 3 feet on each side, back to the shoulders. And that would allow a place for people who are already going to walk or bike on this street, but don't have a sidewalk or any other facility, a place to do so more comfortably. It's not a full bike lane or a sidewalk by any means, but it's just providing a little extra room on the outside of the roadway. And then anywhere where we do have a curb and gutter, we're going to narrow those lanes still to 11 feet, but put that extra width into the middle of the road. And that's because in the future we could come through, and if you see the image on the lower right, we could actually make a formal pedestrian refuge island in locations where there's a crosswalk if we have a little bit more width in the middle of the roadway. And then if someone's crossing today, it gives them a little bit more shy distance to the travel lane if they have to stop on the median today. In Braddock District, we also have 2 changes to proposed crosswalks. The first is at Greely at Bellamy. We are proposing a new crosswalk crossing Greely Road. The north side is the Braddock District and the south side is the Lee District. So, and this is near West Springfield Elementary School. We counted 24 pedestrians crossing Greely Road in 1 hour. And in order to add a new crosswalk, we need to restrict the parking to achieve adequate sight distance. And so the parking restrictions are shown on this graphic in yellow. The next location is, I'm sorry, I have Greely and Bellamy twice. Oops. So we actually have another one at Greely and DeLand, which I must have copied over the wrong slide. It's just down the street, just north of West Springfield Elementary School. And that one's an existing crosswalk today where we're proposing a similar parking restriction in order to achieve sight distance. So we don't actually have to do this. We can leave the crosswalk in place as it is, but we met with residents in the field when we were putting up signs for this meeting, and we're informed that there was some concern about the sight distance as it stands today. There's a lot of overflow parking happening from the school, and a lot of the vehicles there are parking there during the school day. And what could just end up happening if we do this parking restriction is that would just shift them further away from the intersection. They'll probably still park on the street, but just a little further from the intersection. And that would just allow for proper sight distance to the school day when anyone might be parking there. So that's just an additional restriction that we don't have today at an existing crosswalk. And then in the Mason District, we have a couple of crosswalk changes. The first is to add crosswalk marking, this high visibility block pattern at the intersection of Westmoreland Road and Barrett Road. This is a 1/4 mile from Westlawn Elementary School, and it's an all-way stop controlled intersection. So all 4 legs stop, and we counted 53 pedestrians and cyclists in 1 hour at this location, demonstrating a sufficient demand. And then the last location is at Westmoreland and Wayne Road. This is also a 1/4 mile from Westlawn Elementary School and also an all-way stop controlled location where we would have, in this case, because there's pedestrian facilities on all 4 sides, or sidewalks on all 4 sides of the intersection, we would have crosswalks on all 4 legs of the intersection. So tonight we'll be collecting any feedback you have on paving related comments to VDOT. Their website is shown here. It's my.vdot.virginia.gov if you have follow-up comments, or you can call the VDOT portal at 1-800-4-ROAD or 1-800-367-7623. But unfortunately, VDOT cannot add any additional roads to the preliminary paving schedule. So just please be aware of that with your feedback that this year's paving schedule is finalized. Any striping related comments you can submit to Fairfax County, and our information is on this slide. We have the information for the restriping meeting tonight, the website for this meeting, as well as our email address, which is dotinfo@fairfaxcounty.gov. And then we have our mailing address on this slide as well, if you'd like to send comments by mail. So we're now going to take it to questions. If you'd like to ask a question, we will be accepting verbal questions. So please raise your hand so we can call on you and unmute your mic. The Way to do that is at the top of the screen. You can use reactions, raise your hand. If you're calling in by telephone, you have to press *5 to raise your hand. And then when Zara calls on you, you can press *6 to unmute yourself to speak. We'll go ahead and field the questions now.
All right, let's start with Bethany. I am going to allow you to speak. So if you just unmute yourself, you should be able to speak now.
Terrific. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I'm a board member for the Fairfax Alliance for Better Biking. I'm a brand new member there, and I'm an avid biker in the area, but mainly for commuting and for running errands and things. I have two questions. One is I really appreciated your graphics that you had there. I'm wondering why, when there's a chance, when you've got a lane and parking and biking, you're trying to get all in one area, why the default isn't to make it buffered behind the parking, rather than, you were talking about how the door zone, and a lot of the streets around, when you repave, you wind up putting the street lane, the driving lane, the biking lane, and then the parking, when it's safer for bikers to be on the inside. So I was just wondering what the choices are being made to be able to put the biking there. And that's my first question. The other one is the intersection at Keene Mill and Rolling Road is active and a nightmare, especially if you're on foot or on biking. And there's actually one of our major bike stores in the area that's there. I was wondering if there was any thought about, I know there's been some work already in that intersection about doing more there to be able to help protect bicyclists and pedestrians.
Sure. So to answer your first question about, I guess we would call that a parking protected bike lane. In Fairfax County, all of our roadways are owned and maintained by VDOT. So anything we do that we change has to be suitable to VDOT policy. And VDOT does not do parking protected bike lanes. And I believe that and I don't know if Claudia wants to speak up a little more about this, but I believe that that's primarily due to maintenance needs, because if the parking is out in the middle of the road, then they can't reach the curb to maintain the curb. And to maintain the bike lane. And then it's also, sometimes we can't quite fit everything in if we do it if we put the bike lane against the curb. So a parking protected bike lane needs to be quite a bit wider than a traditional bike lane on the outside of the park, that's on the inside of the parking lane, I guess, because you need to have enough width for a buffer between the parking lane and also the bike lane. So those are some of the reasons why we don't do that, at least not yet. And then as far as rolling an old Keene Mill, I believe that falls within the limits of a project that we're working on right now. So if you have specific concerns about that intersection, like certain legs or things that you'd like to see, and you want to email those to our DOT info and just let them know to send them to me, Lauren Delmar, we can certainly look at that, because I can get you in touch with the project manager for that project, and we can look at what the changes are that are being proposed, because I'm pretty sure that falls within an existing funded project area.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate both answers. And I encourage, if we can, to do the protected bike lane. Like you said, it'd make them easier for more people to use them. So as far as we can push to do that protected, I would love it. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is just to follow up. This is Claudia. I'm the VDOT Director for Transportation and Land Use for Fairfax County. And a couple of points that you touched on, Lauren, I wanted to follow up. One is the way that the bike lanes versus parking is assigned, I think is more of a traffic engineering view of how this should be designed. In terms of maintenance, we would be doing that typically when there are no cars parked in that area. And in terms of the Rolling Road project, if you would like, there is a place that you can go to in our webpage to see exactly what's being proposed for that project, including the project manager, who would have all kinds of details. The project website is virginiadot.org. Look under projects, Northern Virginia. There will be a map and you click on the red part, which is Northern Virginia, and then you will see all of the projects listed that are under different stages: design, construction, or studies. In this particular case, it's under design, classification, and you'll be able to find out much more information about that project if you're interested.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Next we have Yvette. I'm going to allow your mic and you should be able to speak now. Yvette? Hello? Yvette? I don't hear them. All right, let me see.
Here, I just want to follow up that I double checked, and the rolling road at Old Keene Mill Road was actually completed in November, the intersection improvements there. And then the rolling road widening work is proposed to be completed in 2024. Just a little update. And it looks like also Supervisor Gross would like to speak. Maybe we could take it to her next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I know that a lot of the conversation probably is about bike lanes, but I wanted to go back to the paving of the neighborhood streets. Could somebody, perhaps Huda or Claudia, review how neighbors are notified that there's going to be repaving in their neighborhoods? Because sometimes we get complaints that I didn't know and I can't get in and out of my driveway, et cetera, et cetera. So could you please do an overview of how the community is notified about paving going on a particular street? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Supervisor Gross. So several days before paving begins, the contractor is asked to put in signs on usually the grass buffer, if that's the kind of road, or in the neighborhood that give an approximate schedule of when the paving will happen, and also request that you don't park on the road during that timeline. And prior to this pandemic, they would actually go door to door and put hangers on the doors. At this point, I think they're doing more on mailboxes or on the side of the road. Now, again, as Huda was explaining, if you go to the paving map, you'd be able to see not this specific schedule, but like in terms of month and day, but rather whether your road is included in the paving program. And if it is, you would be able to contact the project manager, the VDOT project manager, who oversees the contractor that has been awarded the contract for that particular road, and would be able to contact him or her to find out what is the schedule. We do allow the contractors flexibility in terms of within their whole area that they have to pave in any one season, what order they want to do it in, but they have to keep giving notice and information to the VDOT project manager. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, it does.
All right, next I will call on the number that ends in 1653, and your mic should be allowed, and you just need to press *5, or I'm sorry, *6 to unmute. And this is the phone number calling in ending in 1653. So just press *6 to unmute. Okay, I'll give it another minute before I go to the next phone number. Okay, let's try, there's another phone number with their hand raised.
Hello?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Hi, yeah, my name's Dave Wagner. I'm an Annandale resident, and I've been trying to reduce my car use for about 15 years. So I appreciate all the stuff you're doing and saying in regards to pedestrians and crosswalks. But I do think that, you know, it is disappointing that there are no alternate mobility lanes being proposed in this, because it's kind of been all the low-hanging fruit with striping has been done in the past few years, and I think it's time that Fairfax DOT and VDOT especially really up our game and get more aggressive in terms of reallocating space away from private automobiles. Climate change is getting worse and worse. It's still the, you know, private transportation is still the biggest source of emissions. So, you know, it's more of a comment that I would just like to see a lot more aggressive efforts to make biking and other forms of mobility, not just biking, safer. Because, you know, I have a lot of neighbors they want to ride more, they want to get out more, and they're afraid to. And I just don't think that this business as usual is going to move the needle. So I just want to encourage you to get more ambitious with it. So thank you for taking my comment.
And Mr. Wagner, I appreciate that comment, and I'm sure that Fairfax County active transportation staff will have additional comments, but I think it's a very good comment, and I think that just wanted to share a couple of things. In any VDOT administered project, it is a requirement that if there is new construction, that it include accommodations for bike and pedestrian users. Similarly with Fairfax County projects, I won't go into details on that since Lauren and Supervisor Gross are here, but I do understand that in addition to, there's some additional funding that VDOT, HSIP, that's Highway Safety and Improvement Programs, are setting aside for some limited pedestrian programs. We are also waiting to see about the infrastructure bill that has been approved, but details have not yet been shared. But it will include opportunities for localities to apply for funding for kind of accommodations for bike and ped users. We just have not received the details yet. And I will just turn it to Lauren to add more if you'd like on that topic.
Sure. So as we've kind of outlined, this program has pretty limited scope in terms of what we're working on, but we do have a lot of other work throughout the county that we're pursuing as related to protected bike lanes, trails and sidewalks, and intersection improvements and crosswalk improvements. So this is certainly not the limits of what we are working on to try to improve these facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians and shared mobility users. But we, with the limits of this project, we're really just looking at those marking changes that we can make on whatever roads VDOT's choosing to pave, as Huda outlined, which is really irrespective of where we would like to make pavement marking changes.
And I'd just like to add that the impetus for the revisions of the pavement markings that Fairfax County is proposing is basically to try to take advantage of the fact that with repaving, all the existing lane markings will be removed. So it's an opportunity, having sort of a blank slate, to do something different from what's there. And you know, we work in collaboration with Fairfax County active transportation staff to see where they can add those accommodations within the pavement so that we can revise what we have and do something different, consistent with their comprehensive plan.
This is Penny Gross. May I make another comment about that?
Yes,
Please do.
thank you, Supervisor.
Thank
Cox.
you.
Yes, thank
I
you.
wanted to let Mr. Wagner know that the board has been discussing a goal of $100 million over 10 years to be able to improve our pedestrian and biking structure. It's not soup yet, as I like to say, but that is something that was put forward by, I believe it was Supervisor Faust from the Drainsville District, to try and figure out how we can fund $100 million worth of improvements over the next 10 years. That's just in its infancy, but the board has identified some of the same things that you mentioned, Mr. Wagner, as things that we need to get done. Just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross. All right, I am gonna unmute. We have someone with their hand raised, calling from a phone number ending in 1601, and you should be able to speak now. And just make sure you hit *6 to unmute. And again, that's the phone number ending in 1601.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay, thank you. This is Yvette. I had my hand raised earlier through the computer for some reason. It was the unmute was disabled for me for some reason. So sorry about that confusion earlier. So I do have a few questions, and I'll start with my first question. A caller earlier, Bethany, mentioned the parking issue. So I will go ahead and ask a question that expands upon that. I noticed some of the areas that are being addressed are that are being repaved are on streets that have parking along the sides of it. And I was curious to know if there was any consideration of removing that parking. I'm assuming that parking is public parking and not private parking that's owned by the HOA, but I'm not sure about that. So was there any consideration done with that in order to provide some type of walkway or bikeway for users as opposed to just keeping that as parking? So that's my first question. My second question, let's get to that after you answer this one, because this one, the next question is a little bit, I think, more useful for your striping.
Sure. So no, we do not consider removing parking, particularly when it is public parking, but in most cases, when it's in front of residential homes or in areas where I think that there are high use. There's some places potentially where if we're trying to connect in a bike lane somewhere, we might remove parking in small spots in order or shift the start of the parking slightly in order to get the bike lane to be continuous. But in terms of looking at continuous parking removal along a roadway, no, we don't consider that as part of this program.
Okay, that would really greatly help with connectivity, obviously. And I know it's something that seems like no one's ever willing to touch. But anyway, my second question is around some of the intersections that you have there, Greely Road and Bellamy. And I think there's another one in Annandale, Westmoreland, and I don't quite remember the intersection there. I noticed that you're putting in the crosswalks there. Thank you for showing the diagram. And one thing that I've noticed that is not really done a lot within Fairfax County is providing a bump out for those intersections. So if you look at the picture that you have on the screen right now, and you look at the curb radius from turning on Westmoreland onto Barrett, for example, you'll see that that's a huge curb radius right there. So when people are coming off of that turn, they're just it's like an off ramp. So it gives them the driver the ability to turn onto that road at a quite fast speed. So it would be useful if you could stripe that, since I know this is just a striping program, to maybe provide some stripes that are acting like a bump out, so that curb radius, that turn, is a little bit tighter, so that it allows the people who are making those turns to turn a little bit faster or a little bit slower. So this is something that could be done in many places across the county. And you'll see, like in Falls Church, for example, that they're actually doing that, and they're actually putting in, if you go a step further, they're putting in not bollards, but like the flexi posts to kind of really give that visual indicator as well. So that's something that that could be done as part of the striping program, and I'm wondering why that wasn't included.
So for striping, you're talking about specifically just striping the corners to have a tighter radius, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, we do that in places where the radius is quite wide. I know that it is pretty bad here, but typically, like on a road, if we have like a excessive pavement because of some sort of older design standard, we would stripe out the corner. At these particular intersections, there's very little striping work happening because this is just a crosswalk improvement. So they're just adding, VDOT's just going to add in these crosswalk markings and move the stop bar back slightly on Barrett here. And similarly at the next intersection at Westmoreland and Wayne, these stop bars are actually already in place. So they're just going to add these crosswalk markings. This location is not part of a larger striping changes, which would include considering things like striping out the corner radii. So we're not proposing that here. When we do bike lanes or when we make other significant striping changes, we do look for opportunities to reduce those. But typically, the pavement markings reducing the corner radii are not going to have as substantial of an impact as the curb being bumped out or having the flexible posts. And due to maintenance constraints and limitations, VDOT doesn't maintain the flexible posts, so we don't put those in, except for in very rare circumstances they will install them. So yeah, that's pretty much why you don't see them at this location and not done consistently, just because we're really only looking to do that where VDOT's contracting essentially allows them to make changes on the roads that we suggest that we want bigger changes on. So where they're not standard across the board looking at curb extensions or radius reductions through striping. We do look for opportunities just to expand a little bit more on that. We do look for projects where we can make those kind of changes with a curb or other more substantial efforts. Our preference, our stance at Fairfax County DOT is that we prefer to try to put a refuge island in where there's space to do so rather than a curb extension or bumping out the corner. There's two kind of things happening here. There's a radius reduction, which like tightens up the corner, and then there's a curb extension, which usually takes over the parking lane. We are doing tighter radii on other projects that are new projects in the county. So for instance, where we have, we're proposing some places to have protected bike lanes off street. So at the height of the sidewalk. And at some of those locations, we're looking at something called a truck pillow, where we essentially do like a small additional amount of pavement at the corner that makes it so that a typical vehicle making that turn would stay outside of that area, like similar to a roundabout. But then on the truck pillow allows the truck to go over that area with its rear wheels. So we are, working on some of those changes, but it's just not part of this program.
Okay, and I would advocate definitely for the bump outs. I know you said like the pedestrian refuge is also good. I guess potentially, particularly if you have multiple lanes. But that bump out is really helpful because it does decrease the distance that someone has to walk across. So that's, greatly helpful. Of course, reducing the number of lanes also helps too. So I have another question, but I don't know if there are other people waiting to ask questions. So I don't want to take up all the time.
Lauren, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. There's, you can keep going because Bethany's the only one with her hand raised and we can circle back to her.
Okay. The other question that I had was just, it's a question for, I guess it's for VDOT and for SCDOT as well. In terms of, at what point do you do a road diet? I know at one point there was a certain number of volume that a road had to reach for that road to be dieted. So if the traffic volumes were above a certain level, for example, above 20,000, then there's no way that that road would be road dieted. Is there, how is that, what is the number for that now? What are the guidelines for providing a road diet? And that's my last question.
I can field this one. We're typically, and Claudia might want to add to it, we're typically looking for something at least less than 15,000 vehicles per day, but it really just depends on the roadway because in some cases there are roads that have signals that are have a lot of delay. And so if those signals are closely enough spaced, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to remove a lane in between them when we're just going to end up going back and forth in terms of 1 lane to 2 lanes to 1 lane to 2 lanes. So it's a little more nuanced than just a volume basis, but that's a sort of a rough number.
Yeah, and like Lauren said, there's a volume that is considered, but also she mentioned earlier that some of the roads are wider than they need to be given the traffic volume that they carry. Essentially, some of the roads were built based on forecasted volumes because we don't want to be widening them every few years. And so those roads where the construction was done to accommodate projected volumes, and while at the beginning the volumes are not materializing, are candidates for road diets. And there are other conditions in addition to the volume, such as what happens with the site distance if you put the road diet. But there have been, I think, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been as part of this repaving program, may have been it's not typical, but there may have been a case where a road diet was implemented as part of this revised pavement marking program. And it's basically very careful evaluation of the volumes, the width of the road, and the geometry and other factors.
Yeah, and I should
Thank
add, it
you
also
very
definitely
much.
depends on, the turn lane configuration too. So if there are, if we're going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes and we're adding in a center turn lane that allows for a certain additional volume to sort of be accommodated. And if it's maybe sometimes we have a 4-lane divided that we're taking down to a 2-lane divided that already has turn lanes, that can affect the feasibility of the road diet too.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate the information.
Well, it looks like that's all of the raised hands that we have right now. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question, did not get an opportunity to? All right, well, I'm gonna go back to my slide with the contact information. Thank you all so much for attending tonight. And if you have further comments or questions, please reach out to either us or VDOT or both. Really appreciate your participation and enthusiasm for this program and all the other active transportation work that we're doing. And Supervisor Gross, would you like to say goodbye?
Just thank you to all those who joined in, and also a special thank you to staff. I know a lot of work goes into preparing to do a virtual meeting with the slides and everything. You all did a really nice job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross, and everyone who joined. We appreciate your interest and your time, and wish you a very good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Good night, everyone.
Have a good